Hi everyone, how you doing? I wanted to make a quick video at the start of this week just to talk a little bit about what we're going to see this week and to help wrap up a little bit from the weeks before. So I'm mostly done the essay ones. I'm going to finish, I have a few left that I'm going to finish this afternoon. So if you haven't checked on your essay one, go on to the portal and check on essay one and see my feedback. If you want to revise that essay, you can still revise that one too. But otherwise we're into poetry now, and I think we've had a couple of good weeks. We had some nice discussions last week, especially about irony, and I look forward to reading your journals about metaphor. Metaphor is one of the most important aspects of poetry, so it's important to be able to identify metaphors and be able to understand what those metaphors are showing us in poetry. Some people say that's the height of poetry. It's a good metaphor. This week we're going to shift gears a little bit. During the first week we talked about speaker and tone and imagery, and then we talked about metaphor, and we've talked a little bit about symbolism and irony and things like that. But this week we're going to talk about the sound of poetry. Poems are often called lyrics, right? Which implies that they're songs or song-like, and originally they were meant to be sung as songs. And the rhythmical qualities of poems is how orators were able to remember poems for a long time. It's that very rhythm that allowed people to remember full books like the Odyssey and the Iliad before they were ever written down on paper. The rhythm helped orators to remember and to recite the poems and the stories. So rhythm's a really important feature of poetry, although a lot of times it gets lost in favor of other things like imagery or metaphor. But you always want to make sure you listen carefully to your poems. And so we're going to look at that more closely this week. We're going to talk about rhythms and sound features in poems, and especially we're going to talk about meter. And meter is kind of a tough concept to grasp, especially if you don't hear it right away. So I do want to just take a quick second and talk a little bit about sound in poetry and about meter and how to identify meter. And there's a really good video this week that gets into more depth about how to identify meter, which is called scansion, scanning a poem to see what the rhythmical patterns are. Here I have a couple of poems from last week, and I thought these would be a really good example for us to talk a little bit about rhythms and sound. So several people in the comments mentioned that Ballad of the Landlord sounds really rhythmical and has a lot of rhythm to it, and it does. And what creates the rhythm in this poem? Landlord, landlord, my roof has sprung a leak. Don't you remember I told you about it way last week? Landlord, landlord, these steps is broken down. When you come up yourself, it's a wonder you don't fall down. $10 you say I owe you? $10 you say is due? Well, that's $10 more and I'll pay you till you fix this house up new. So what's helping to create the rhythm in this poem? One of the things that makes the rhythm for us is the rhyme scheme, right? The end rhyme in the lines helps to solidify the pattern of rhythm. So we have down and down here. And in this one we have 4 rhymes. You, do, you, knew. And they all sound very similar, so that's why this particular stanza sounds really rhythmic. The end rhymes help to contribute to that. In this particular poem, there's also a really sort of sprung rhythm that you can kind of hear through the repetition, right? Landlord, landlord, your steps is broken down. When you come up yourself, it's a wonder you don't fall down. So you can hear how the end rhyme solidifies the rhythmical pattern. But even the repetition, $10 you say I owe you, $10 you say as due, well, that's $10 more and I'll pay you. The repetition of certain phrases in here helps to create a rhythmical kind of pattern. So in this poem, a lot of the rhythm is created through the end rhymes and through the repetition, and it really changes a lot towards the end. Police, police, come and get this man. He's trying to ruin the government and overturn the land. Copper's whistle, patrol bell, arrest, precinct station, iron cell. And then the ending. Headlines in the press, man threatens landlord, tenant held no bail, judge gives Negro 90 days in county jail. In this stanza right here, it really shortens up, right? And the sounds become a lot quicker, and they're all stressed syllables. Copper whistle, patrol bell, arrest, precinct station, iron cell. That's what makes that sound really kind of forceful. And that's not by accident, right? Because in this section of the poem, Langston Hughes is trying to emphasize the sort of immediacy or the urgency of the situation. and the rhythm kind of reflects that. And that's what you want to be on the lookout for when you're looking at rhythms in poetry, is what are the rhythms in the poem first? Is there a reason for certain rhythms in the poem? And more importantly, where are the variations in the poem? Because the rhythmical variations are what give the poem character, and the way that poets play with rhythm is through varying meter and rhythm. So that's that. Not necessarily a metrical poem, but it does have a kind of rhythm that we can sense. This poem, on the other hand, My Mistress's Eyes, does have a definitive meter. And you can hear it if I read the poem emphasizing the meter. You can really hear it. And I think in this poem, too, it's interesting where he makes the departures from meter. So he says, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, then her breasts are dun. So maybe you can hear the rhythm there. Again, the end rhyme helps to reinforce sun, dun, red, head, reinforce the rhythm. But it also has a meter in each of the lines, which is a regular pattern of stress and unstressed. Let me try to read it with emphasis so you can see that. I have seen roses damasks red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. In some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, she treads on ground. And yet by heaven I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. So in this particular case, you hear the end rhyme, which reinforces the rhythm, but it also has a regular pattern of stress and unstressed. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Her coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. So generally, there's a pattern of 5, right? And this is called iambic pentameter, and that's what Shakespeare used to write in iambs, which is unstressed, stressed syllables. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. So like even the word nothing has a stress at the beginning. Nothing like is a hard stress, the sun. So we're going to get more into meter this week, and we're going to watch a video on meter. But you want to be able to identify meter, especially so you can notice some variations. Like in this one, if hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. Wires, black wires grow is all stressed in a row, so it doesn't have that regular unstressed, stressed rhythm. If we look closely at the lines, he groups a bunch of stresses together. So those kinds of changes in rhythm really stand out in poems, and that's why it's helpful to understand meter. It's not a total piece of cake, so I think it's going to be more challenging this week than it was in previous weeks. But I do want you to do your best to try to understand meter. I think the video is really good, and the chapter in the book is pretty good. Understand meter, how to identify meter, some different types of meter, and then practice scanning some of the poems for meter, and especially noticing where there might be some variations in meter. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week is sound and meter. So it should be a lot of fun, and I'll look forward to talking to you on the discussion boards, and I'll see you then.